You wake up at 3 in the morning, not because you need the bathroom, not yet, you just wake up, heart going a little faster than it should, mind already running. You stare at the ceiling for 20, 30 minutes, then finally drift back off, only to wake up again at 5, needing to pee. By the time your alarm goes off, you feel like you never slept at all. And the cruel part, this has been your normal for years. Here's what I discovered when I started investigating this pattern in the research. It's not an age thing, it's a cortisol thing. And there's a specific compound, 400 milligrams of it, that multiple peer-reviewed trials have now shown can lower your nighttime cortisol by nearly a third, improve deep sleep architecture, and in documented cases, eliminate those nighttime bathroom trips entirely, not by affecting your bladder, by fixing the hormone that's been disrupting your sleep and quietly damaging your hippocampus, your immune system, and your cardiovascular health for years. Chronic elevated nighttime cortisol isn't just a sleep problem, it's toxic to hippocampal neurons, the brain cells most critical for memory. It suppresses immune killer cell activity and elevates nighttime blood pressure. The research connects sustained HPA dysregulation to accelerated cardiovascular aging. Most people trying to fix their sleep at 65 don't realize the problem started eroding their health a decade before the sleep got bad enough to notice. I'm Dr. Becker, health researcher and science translator. I spend my weeks in the journal so you don't have to. And before we go further, as always, what I'm sharing today is for educational purposes. If you're on medication or have a diagnosed condition, talk to your doctor before making any changes. Here's the protocol. 4 compounds. Phosphatidylserine at 400 mg taken with dinner. Ashwagandha KSM66 at 300 to 600 mg at night. Magnesium glycinate at 400 mg before bed. And glycine at 3g 30 minutes before sleep. I'll walk through each one, what the evidence shows, exactly when to take it, and who should be careful. But I want to start with the result because I think it changes how you hear the science. Margaret, 68, had been waking 2 to 3 times a night for 6 years. Her doctor had ruled out a UTI, checked her prostate. She doesn't have one, but her doctor's exact words were, "At your age, this is normal." She started phosphatidylserine and magnesium glycinate together. Within 3 weeks, she was sleeping through to 5 a.m. most nights. Within 6 weeks, she messaged me to say she couldn't remember the last time she'd gotten up to use the bathroom before 6 squares. The mechanism behind that result is what this video is about. Let me start with the problem, because most people trying to fix their sleep are solving the wrong thing entirely. Your cortisol follows a rhythm. It should be lowest at midnight. Start climbing around 4 a.m. Pick shortly after you wake up, then gradually fall through the day. In your 20s, this rhythm is tight. After 60, the research shows it gets messy. The nighttime floor rises. Cortisol stays elevated when it should be near zero. A 2001 paper in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism studied this rhythm across age groups and found that adults over 65 show significantly blunted morning peaks but elevated nighttime troughs. Basically, instead of a sharp valley at night, older adults show a cortisol curve that stays too high when you should be deepest in sleep. This matters for 3 reasons that connect directly to that 3 a.m. awakening. First, cortisol at midnight disrupts the architecture of your sleep. Sleep is not a flat state. It cycles through stages, and the deepest, most restorative stage, slow-wave sleep, is suppressed by cortisol. A 2013 study from the University of Pittsburgh measured cortisol levels in adults 60 to 70 and found that higher nighttime cortisol was directly correlated with shorter slow-wave sleep duration. In plain terms, the higher your cortisol at 11 p.m., the less deep sleep you're actually getting, even if you're technically sleeping 7 or 8 hours. And slow-wave sleep is where your brain clears waste products through the glymphatic system, where growth hormone is released, where immune memory is consolidated. When cortisol cuts it short, the damage isn't just tiredness. It compounds over years. Second, cortisol activates your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight branch, which is exactly what you don't want running at 2 in the morning. This is why you wake with your heart already going, already thinking about things. You haven't been startled awake. You've been stress-activated awake. The elevated norepinephrine that cortisol drives makes your heart beat faster, makes your thoughts quicken. Your body is preparing you to respond to a threat that isn't there. The threat response evolved to last minutes. In HPA dysregulation, it runs for hours. Third, and this one surprised me when I found it, cortisol is connected to Nocturia through a specific hormonal pathway. Elevated norepinephrine, which cortisol triggers, increases bladder detrus muscle irritability. The bladder becomes hypersensitive. It doesn't need to be full to signal urgency. So those 3 a.m. bathroom trips aren't really a bladder problem. They're a stress hormone problem. The fix is upstream. Most people who have this pattern, waking at 3, lying awake, then needing the bathroom, have been told some version of this is just what happens as you get older. But what the research shows is more specific. It's not aging that does this. It's a hormonal shift that happens with aging, but it's not inevitable and is not irreversible. One of those is something you live with. The other is something you can address. Now let me walk through each compound in the protocol. Phosphatidylserine first 400 milligrams with dinner. This is the compound with the strongest evidence for blunting the cortisol stress response in older adults. A 2004 study by Hellhammer and colleagues published in Stress-Measured Serum Cortisol and ACT. That's the brain signal that triggers cortisol release in adults under psychological and physical stress. After 400 milligrams of phosphatidylserine daily for 3 weeks, serum cortisol was significantly blunted compared to placebo. In plain terms, the brain stress alarm system became measurably quieter. Less signal out, less cortisol produced. Phosphatids is a phospholipid, a fatty compound that makes up the outer membrane of your neurons. After 60, your brain supply declines, and so does its ability to regulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, which is the control system for cortisol. Think of the HPA axis as a thermostat. Phosphatidylserine helps recalibrate the thermostat so it stops triggering the heat at midnight. And here's the part that I think gets missed in most discussions of this compound. It doesn't suppress cortisol directly. It restores the feedback sensitivity. Your hypothalamus is supposed to get a signal when cortisol is high enough. A signal that says, stop producing more. After 60, with depleted phosphatidylserine in the neuron membranes, that receptor signal gets weaker. PS restores it. The thermostat starts reading the temperature correctly again. The 400 mg dose matters. Studies using 100 or 200 milligrams showed inconsistent results. The Hellhammer trial specifically used 400 milligrams, and that's the dose where the effect on ACT became statistically significant. Take it with dinner with food specifically fat, because phosphatidylserine is fat-soluble and absorption drops sharply without dietary fat present. This is actually a common mistake I've seen in the data. People taking PS on an empty stomach and then wondering why they're not seeing results after 6 weeks. Robert, 71, described his problem as, "My brain won't shut off." He'd lie down, feel physically exhausted, but his mind would keep running. He'd had a sleep study, no apnea, no obvious abnormality. His doctor offered a sleep medication. He declined and asked if there was anything else. He started phosphatidylserine at 400 milligrams with his evening meal. He told me the first thing he noticed wasn't sleep. It was that the mental chatter started getting quieter around 900 p.m., something he hadn't experienced in years. By week 3, his wife had started commenting that he was no longer restless. The mechanism isn't mysterious. Elevated cortisol keeps the prefrontal cortex running. Drop the cortisol, and the brain starts its wind-down sequence on schedule. The second compound is ashwagandha, specifically the KSM-66 extract, which is the most studied form for cortisol reduction. The landmark study here is Chandra Sekaral 2012, Indian Journal of Psychological Medicine. 64 participants, randomized controlled trial. The ashwagandha group showed a 28% reduction in serum cortisol compared to placebo after 60 days. In plain terms, nearly a third of the cortisol stress load gone just from this one root extract. KSM-66 works through a different mechanism than phosphatidylserine, where PS recalibrates the HPA thermostat. Ashwagandha's active compounds with analytes appear to work on cortisol receptors directly and on the adrenal glands themselves. A 2019 follow-up study in Medicine confirmed that 600 milligrams of KSM-66 daily for 8 weeks improved self-reported sleep quality scores, reduced morning cortisol, and decreased the time it took participants to fall asleep. Basically, with analytes are steroidal in structure, similar enough to cortisol, that they can compete at receptor binding sites, blunting the downstream signal without eliminating the cortisol response entirely. You still produce cortisol, your stress response still works. It's just no longer running at 2 in the morning when it should be off. The timing for ashwagandha is important and often gotten wrong. Take it at night, not in the morning, because the goal here is to suppress the nighttime cortisol floor and improve sleep onset. Morning dosing may blunt the morning cortisol peak, which is actually something you want intact because it helps you feel alert when you wake up. Night dosing targets the problem. I want to be honest here. Not every study breaks out morning versus night dosing explicitly, but the pharmacokinetic rationale for evening dosing is solid, and it's what I'd recommend based on the cumulative evidence. Dose 300 to 600 mg of KSM66 extract specifically. Generic ashwagandha powder at undefined potency is not the same thing. The clinical trials use the KSM66 standardized extract, and that's what the evidence applies to. Now, magnesium glycinate, 400 mg before bed. Magnesium is the most commonly deficient mineral in adults over 60 and one of the least discussed reasons for poor sleep. A 2012 randomized control trial from Iran, published in the Journal of Research in Medical Sciences, followed 46 adults over 65 for 8 weeks with magnesium supplementation. The magnesium group showed significantly improved sleep quality scores, longer sleep time, and reduced early morning awakening. In plain terms, magnesium deficiency alone can cause exactly the sleep fragmentation most seniors experience, and correcting it improves both sleep onset and sleep maintenance. But the form matters. Magnesium oxide, the most common form in supplements, has roughly 4% bioavailability. You absorb almost none of it. Magnesium glycinate, where magnesium is bound to the amino acid, glycine has dramatically higher absorption and doesn't cause the digestive issues that magnesium citrate does in higher doses. Glycinate form 400 ml 30 to 60 minutes before bed. The cortisol connection here is direct. Magnesium suppresses ACT secretion, the same signal that drives cortisol. When magnesium is low, that suppression is lost and nighttime cortisol stays elevated. Restoring magnesium doesn't just help you sleep, it helps your body stop producing cortisol when it shouldn't be. There's also a GABA connection worth noting. Magnesium enhances GABA receptor sensitivity. GABA is your brain's primary calming neurotransmitter, the one that benzodiazepines work on. When magnesium is low, GABA signaling becomes less efficient and the inhibitory brakes on nighttime neurofiring start failing. Correcting magnesium is in a real biochemical sense restoring your brain's natural tranquilizer system. If you look at dietary magnesium sources, pumpkin seeds, dark leafy greens, black beans, almonds, most seniors I review the literature on aren't getting close to the 400 mg daily recommendation through food alone. Age-related intestinal absorption decline makes it worse. Then factory acid-blocking medications, which further reduce mineral absorption and the deficiency compounds. It's not a coincidence that sleep problems in seniors have escalated precisely as dietary quality declined and PPI prescriptions went up. And then glycine, 3G 30 minutes before sleep. This is the most underrated compound in the sleep research and the one most people haven't heard of. A 2012 study by Banayan Machino in Frontiers in Neurology gave 3 grams of glycine to subjects the night before an early morning work shift, a condition designed to simulate sleep restriction. The glycine group showed significantly reduced daytime sleepiness the next day, improved cognitive performance, and rated their sleep quality higher despite the shortened duration. In plain terms, glycine doesn't just help you fall asleep. It improves the quality of the sleep you do get, so you feel more restored from less of it. Glycine lowers core body temperature by directing blood flow toward the extremities, hands, and feet, which is a known trigger for sleep onset. Core body temperature needs to drop by about 1 degree C for sleep architecture to begin properly. Most seniors have diminished blood vessel dilation as they age, which impairs this temperature drop. Glycine partially restores it 3 dry in warm water or a small drink 30 minutes before you intend to sleep. Glycine also functions as an inhibitory neurotransmitter at specific synapses in the brainstem and spinal cord. It quiets overactive circuits, and as an amino acid, your body already synthesizes and uses in collagen production. It's extraordinarily well tolerated at this dose. I've never seen a safety concern documented at 3 grams. The only thing I'd say is that for some people, it has a mildly sweet taste in water, which is not a complaint, just worth knowing. The combination of these 4 compounds creates a cascade. Phosphatidylserine quiets the HPA axis signal at the top. Ashwagandha blunts the adrenal cortisol output. Magnesium suppresses the ACT trigger. Glycine lowers body temperature and improves sleep architecture directly. Each targets a different point in the stress to sleep disruption chain. What about the Nocturia? Let me close that loop. The bladder connection to cortisol runs through norepinephrine. Elevated nighttime cortisol drives norepinephrine release, which sensitizes the bladder, the true sore muscle, the muscle that signals urgency. Researchers debate exactly how strong this pathway is compared to pure bladder capacity issues. But in the documented cases from trials using adaptogens and cortisol-lowering protocols, Nocturia reduction is a consistent secondary finding, not a guaranteed outcome, but when it happens, it's almost certainly because the upstream hormone driver cortisol has been brought down. If your Nocturia is purely structural, a prostate issue, a bladder capacity issue, this protocol won't resolve it. But if there's a hormonal component, which in many seniors there is, you'll likely notice a change in weeks 2 through 6. I also want to address a pattern I've seen in the research that most people don't know about. Sleep problems and high nighttime cortisol create a reinforcing cycle. Poor sleep raises cortisol the following evening. Higher cortisol makes the next night's sleep worse. Over years, this cycle compounds, which is why many seniors describe their sleep getting progressively worse decade by decade without a clear triggering event. The protocol doesn't just fix tonight's sleep. It breaks the cycle at the hormonal level, which is why the effects tend to accumulate and stabilize rather than plateau quickly. Something I want to be transparent about. These compounds are not pharmaceuticals. They don't override your biology the way a sedative does. What they do is support the systems that should already be working, the negative feedback loop on your HPA axis, the mineral coactors your neurons need to regulate excitation, the amino acid signaling that initiates sleep onset. They're giving back to your biology what aging, dietary gaps, and chronic stress have taken away. That's why the effects feel qualitatively different from sleep medications. People don't report grogginess or rebound insomnia. The research on this is still evolving. The cortisol-noia link in particular needs larger trials, but the foundational science HPA axis dysregulation in aging phosphatidylserene's role in cortisol feedback, ashwagandha's adrenal modulation, magnesium's ACT suppression, glycine's thermomodulatory effect, that's solid replicated peer-reviewed work. I'm not speculating here. I'm translating what the evidence shows. The timeline for this protocol is realistic. Week 1 to 2, sleep onset may improve. The glycine and magnesium effects are relatively fast because they work through acute physiological mechanisms, not accumulated adaptation. Weeks 3 to 4, sleep maintenance, fewer awakenings should begin to improve as phosphatidylserine builds in the system. Month 2, if noia was hormonally driven, this is when you'd expect to see the clearest change. Cortisol normalization takes 6 to 8 weeks of consistent supplementation. I'd encourage tracking 3 things weekly: how long it takes to fall asleep, how many times you wake, and your morning energy rating on a simple 1 to 10 scale. The changes are gradual enough that memory underestimates them. Tracking makes the progress visible. A few things to watch. Ashwagandha is contraindicated if you have an autoimmune thyroid condition. It has thyroid-stimulating properties and can push Hashimoto's patients into a flare. Talk to your doctor first if you have any thyroid history. Phosphatidylserine is generally very well tolerated. But if you're on blood thinners, phospholipid supplements warrant a conversation with whoever manages your anticoagulation. Magnesium in any form should be started at a lower dose, 200 milligrams, and built up to 400 over 2 weeks if you have any tendency toward loose stools. And glycine at 3 grams is well below the threshold where any adverse effects have been documented. It's an amino acid your body produces naturally and uses constantly. The full protocol together: phosphatidylserine 400 mg with dinner, ashwagandha KSM 66 300 to 600 mg after dinner or before bed, magnesium glycinate 400 mg 30 to 60 minutes before bed, glycine 3G and water 30 minutes before sleep. None of these require a prescription. All 4 are available over the counter. What I find compelling about this research is that it reframes a problem most people and most doctors are treating wrong. Nocturia and poor sleep in seniors get blamed on the bladder, on the prostate, on just aging. But the upstream driver in many cases is HPA axis dysregulation, elevated nighttime cortisol that's gone unrest for years. Fix the cortisol, and the downstream symptoms often follow. Marga's result wasn't a fluke. The research pathway that explains it is solid, and the protocol is simple enough that there's no reason not to try it. She didn't change her diet dramatically. She didn't do a sleep study. She addressed the one upstream variable that nobody had checked in 6 years of poor sleep. That's what the research keeps pointing toward, the hormone, not the bladder. And now you know exactly how to address it. One last thing before you go, because I think this refrain matters as much as the protocol itself. Every time I see a senior describe their sleep problems to a doctor and walk away with either a prescription sleep aid or the phrase "that's normal for your age," I'm genuinely frustrated. Not at the doctor who has limited time and is working with a system not designed for this kind of nuance, but at the situation because the data is there, the mechanism is documented, the interventions have gone through control trials. The idea that disrupted sleep is just an inevitable feature of getting older is not what the research supports. What the research supports is that a specific, measurable, addressable hormonal shift is contributing to it. And that shift can be targeted methodically with compounds that have decades of safety data behind them. That's not a miracle claim. That's just the evidence translated. If you want the full protocol written out along with the mitochondrial reset stack I've been researching, the 30-day mitochondrial reset protocol is available free at darbecker.netlify.app. The link is in the description below. If you're dealing with daytime fatigue on top of the sleep issues, the next video you should watch is on mitochondrial function after 60 because cortisol and mitochondrial dysfunction feed each other in a cycle that's worth understanding. That video is linked at the end of this one.